Good morning, everybody. This is a difficult thing for me to talk about right now because it is indeed nuanced, but I just felt like I read this morning. I read this just now, just a few seconds ago. The New York Times, they send out an email every morning with headlines and ideas and this and that, and I don't usually read it, but the headline of the email said "Suffrage at 100," and I was like, "This is interesting. Learn about it's the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. Let's see a little bit about what's going on there. What kind of historical insights they want to give us on this day." And it started off normal and appropriate, and then all of a sudden, it took, that new line that it's, they said, well, even though the women got the vote in 1920, they didn't really get the vote till 1965. They have to move that line to just make us look bad, make us keep looking bad, make America just look horrible. That's as I understand, I didn't watch the virtual convention last night, but I understand that was the theme, to start off talking about our history and then talking about how bad we are and how guilty we have to have. And I heard there was even a pastor, obviously a leftist, who got up and said that that we'll go to hell if we vote for Trump. I mean, what kind of I mean, seriously, all the years the Democrats yelled at us for doing that type of stuff, and and here they're doing it to us, and for no reason. All the things, again, I don't need to reiterate this, but all the things that they claim that they're upset at Donald Trump about are things that Obama did. And here's the latest example: is the post office thing. President Trump has nothing to do with any of that, but they just made up a conspiracy theory blaming him, when the fact is, even yesterday I performed a little marriage ceremony, and I said, all right, as soon as I see a mailbox, I'm going to drop the marriage license in the mailbox. And the groom said, oh, that's not so easy these days. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother had outside of her house this really cool looking old mailbox, and they took it away, and it was gone. And it was I missed it because I liked the way that mailbox looked. It was different. It was one of those little mailboxes. It was on it was like on a kind of a pillar, that concrete. It was different. Anyway, that's not the point for right now. That would have been enough. That would have been bad enough if it was just Hate America Day, right? Which is what the left has been all about for a very long time. But then it went even further. And I think at this point is where it really broke the line. And I say this as a person who cares about the rights of incarcerated people, cares about rehabilitation, and cares about, and that's what I do for a living, meaning that's my job, is to protect the First Amendment religious freedoms of prison inmates. That's what I do for a living. I'm a prison chaplain, and I'm not just there, I'm not like most prison rabbis who are just there for the Jews. I'm a prison chaplain for all faiths, for ones that I obviously have different opinions about, and yet I'm gonna do more for the ones that I disagree with more than I will. I'm not gonna show favoritism for any group. I'm struggling with that right now, how to handle certain things with Yontiv and so forth. but that's neither here nor there. I really wanted to talk about this point, and I really wanted to do it quickly, but I like to ramble on, and I'm sorry about that. Rabbi Bart Sadok said on a video from a few weeks ago I was watching yesterday that he doesn't edit his videos. He doesn't make these fancy videos that other rabbis make. He just talks, and that's what I do. And it happened, I don't know, his hand was bleeding or something, and he didn't care. He didn't stop the video. It was a live feed, actually. And this is not live, but it'll be up as soon as I can. I don't have reception here where I'm driving. So the New York Times actually went on to say that, the suffrage fight continues to this day to end the disenfranchisement of former felons. Now, I'm willing to discuss this question, although now even the Democrats want inmates to vote in jail. Forget about former felons. And I do believe there should be some kind of a process, perhaps, to regain the right to vote. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. I'm not saying that, someone who commits a crime and has rehabilitated and stayed out of prison for a certain amount of time perhaps should not get the right to vote restored. Similarly, perhaps in a certain way, although I was discussing this with my wife recently, is most of the rights, we were discussing whether or not health care is a right, and I said the concept of rights in the Constitution is a negative one, meaning that the government should not it cannot stand in the way of our rights. Then she said, what about the right to vote? That's a positive right. So they said, still, it's that the government is not standing in the way of, and that's a different type of a thing, because it's the essential aspect of the negative force against the government. And when I say negative, I mean in the sense of what, how we speak in Jewish theology or ideology or discussion of our scripture and the commandments of positive commandments and negative commandments. And the positive commandments are the thou shalts, and the negative commandments are the thou shalt nots. So essentially, when we talk about rights, what we mean is that the government is not to infringe upon our existing rights. And so voting is different because it's what maintains that possibility. Although you might want to make the argument of health care as far as the right to life, the right to, perhaps. Excuse me. Again, I'm not editing right now. I'm just going straight through, and I apologize for that. But we have a different issue here: is to compare women's suffrage and racial, removing the impedance against people who have racial identities from voting, and the injustice that the Democrats did of trying to prevent people from voting on basis of race, which is their same identity politics playbook that they're still playing today. And then they go and accuse Republicans of doing that when it's not true. And the fact of the matter is, again, it's racist for, Democrats to think that somehow that black people aren't able to get driver's licenses or something, or it's because of the elitist view of white liberals who think that they're better than everybody. But here, to compare innocent people and their disenfranchisement in the voting process historically to people who committed crimes by their own free will. Again, I do believe in redemption. I do believe in forgiveness, which in general it seems that the left doesn't. As you see with all this, the Me Too movements and everything, they'll dwell on something from somebody's past, and they don't afford the opportunity of forgiveness unless they happen to like your politics. But and that's the same thing here, because they assume that if you're in jail, you're probably going to vote Democrat, right? It's back to that whole trope that the Democrats have of you ain't black, etc., etc. And it goes along. I'm not saying this is what I believe. I'm saying this is what the Democrats believe. The fact of the matter is, I know a lot of both current that I know, current inmates who are Republicans and former inmates, and you hear stories of redemption on the radio of people, call into talk shows. Obviously, these are the people who listen to the talk shows. All right, it is what it is, I hear. So that's the story. I just find it unconscionable to make that comparison. I can understand that you want to, that this could be an issue that someone want to perhaps be an activist for. That I can commiserate with, and I see there's a nuanced issue, and I don't know what's the right way to approach it. I really don't know. Whether or not we should seek to restore the voting rights of former felons. I can see the argument that can be made, but to compare that somehow to women's suffrage or to other civil rights issues, that's troubling to me, because it kind of it paints. It almost makes it sound like, the ones who are disenfranchised by no fault of their own, that's somehow their fault by putting these two together in the same basket. And that's the problem I have with it. It's similar in a certain sense to the issue with how Mr. Biden chose his running mate. If he would have just said, I'm going to pick the best person, I don't care their skin color, I don't care their gender, and then he picked a woman of color, that would have been incredible, right? As at least, it would have demonstrated that we are a post-racial society, and that all of the things that we are hoping that America will become, and to right the wrongs of America's past, that would have been an authentic righting of the wrongs in a certain sense. Still, it doesn't, at least partially so. But the fact that he just said, I'm picking a woman of color, Okay, so you just disenfranchised, you know, I don't know, 80% of America. That you said, you're only going to pick from this pool of 20% of America. Isn't that kind of racist? Isn't that a violation of civil rights? I mean, can you imagine you put an ad for a job and you say anyone of this particular gender, this particular race need not apply, right? That's essentially what he did. Just because he picked a minority as far as racial minority doesn't mean that it makes it any better. But what's worse here, but that's not even the issue. I think it really is an insult to Ms. Harris, to Senator Harris. Not even going to attempt to pronounce her first name because whatever way we say it, they're going to say we said it wrong, and we're going to get in trouble for that. Maybe I'm pronouncing Harris wrong too. Who knows? Maybe I'm pronouncing Biden wrong. I don't know. But Senator Harris, it doesn't look good for her. It's saying, I picked you not because you're the best person for the job, but because of accidents of birth that you didn't earn. That's insulting. I mean, did the Democrats really pick an affirmative action candidate for the vice president? And she is an accomplished woman. And she is an accomplished human being. Forget about that she's a woman. Forget about that she's Indian. Forget about that she's Jamaican. Forget about anything. She's a human being. That's all that should matter. The accomplishments. I don't know if it's, but I really don't know if it's the best choice. I don't know if it's the worst choice. It's certainly better than some of the other choices that he could have made. I don't know. But it's a balancing act. And it just this announcement beforehand that made it, it's one thing if it was a foregone conclusion that this was who he was picking. It's one thing, but this foregone conclusion that the assumption was that he didn't make the decision yet, and no one else had made the decision yet, but that the announcement was that this is the pool I'm gonna pick from is women of color. That's insulting. That's insulting not to the men who and white women, men of all colors, and white women who are disenfranchised by that. But it's a bigger insult to whoever gets picked, because it's telling them you were only picked because you check off some boxes on the identity politics roll call, not because you actually deserve it. And that's absolutely awful. But that's the Democrats. They are racists. They've always been racists, and they will always be racists. While we're tearing down statues, although that's, I guess, kind of calmed down in recent weeks or two, why don't we tear down the Democrat Party? Can you imagine if the Nazi Party after World War II would have kept the name Nazi Party and then had the audacity to go and say that the people who fought them, they're the real racists, and that the parties switched and this and that and whatever it is. That's what but they're still insisting on keeping the name Nazi. That's what the Democrats did. We've had new parties. The Republican Party popped up really as a third party, and now became the main party, and the Whigs disappeared. And the Democrats today, although they claim to be the spiritual heirs of the old Democratic Republicans, they really aren't. The main platform of the Democratic Republicans in Jefferson's time was small government, limited central government, which is the opposite of today's Democrats. So you can't make that argument that they're somehow the spiritual heirs of Jefferson. But since Jackson, they've been racist, and that's what they are to this day. They're still the same party of Woodrow Wilson, of FDR. LBJ was a huge racist who made racist statements at the moment that he signed into law the Republican bills for civil rights. And he took all the credit. And he made horribly disgusting racist statements when he did that. This is well documented, well known. That's the world we live in. The racist party that to this day is obsessed with race. Is obsessed with identity politics. They're the ones calling the party of Lincoln racists, when we're the ones who are really bringing true justice, true racial justice to this country, and truly righting the wrongs and uprooting the institutionalized racism of the Democrats. That's the truth. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'll see you all later. It's supposed to be 5 minutes. Was it 20 minutes? 22 minutes? I can't see because my shirt is white. God bless you. Take care.